everyone, and thank you so much for joining me today here at Life as a Law Student. I'm actually right in the middle of my moot court competition, so I wasn't originally planning on releasing a video this weekend, but my friend Steve Schwartz, who was a guest on my channel last week, said that he had some additional tips that he'd like to share with all of you about how to dramatically increase your LSAT score. So this week we are turning over the channel to him to share that advice and information, as well as give you another opportunity to take advantage of the limited time deal that we have for you in the description below. If you're interested in working with Steve, make sure that you check that out as soon as possible because eventually it will be removed from the description. But don't worry, all of the advice that Steve gives in this video will remain on the channel forever. So without further ado, take it away, Steve.
My name is Steve Schwartz. I've been teaching the LSAT since 2005. I self-studied for it for about an entire year. A lot of that was wasted time. I'm not saying it should take that long. I certainly wish it hadn't taken that long for me. I made a lot of mistakes along the way that I'm hoping to help all of you avoid as well. So I started at a 152. I ended up ultimately with a 175 on test day. I think I could have done it in probably half the time, possibly less. What I did wrong. This is a mistake I see so many students make. I call it the obsessive practice exam narrative, where you take exam after exam, measuring your results obsessively, hoping that something will change, but nothing does. Because you're essentially engaging in the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over, but expecting different results. And tracking your results is not the same thing as learning from your mistakes. So what you've got to do when you encounter any problem that gives you difficulty is figure out exactly where the root of your misunderstanding came from. Was it in stimulus, the argument, or the passage? Was it in the question stem? Or was it in the answer choices? This is the Socratic review method. So my recommendation for you is that you fill in review, you engage in review from the very beginning of your process. And you don't just look at the answer key and say, oh, I get it now, and then move on. You've got to be able to articulate it in your own words. And whether that's in keeping some kind of journal or document, a wrong answer journal, for example, a bullet journal, a passion planner, whatever you want to do with it, it's all good with me. Even not even writing down, it could be talking out with a friend or a coach or a tutor or a study buddy, but you've got to get the words out of your head, ideally to somebody else or documented in some way so you can prove to yourself you've thoroughly got it, explaining it in your own words. If you're just rereading the stimulus and saying, the argument says this is the conclusion, this is the evidence, that's good, but that's a level 1. I want you to get to a level 2 or level 3 where you can articulate it in your own words, simplifying it, dumbing it down. If they're saying utilize, you say use. Simpler language can make it easier for you to comprehend and see what's really going on there. So open, again, the obsessive practice exam narrative. We are throwing that aside in favor of the Socratic review method, which is one element of what I call the 5 phases of LSAT prep, the LASER approach to LSAT prep. LASER is an acronym standing for learning, accuracy, sections, exams, and review. So I articulated the Socratic review method first because I think it's the most often neglected, overlooked part of the process. But there are 4 other phases before that: learning, accuracy, sections, exams, then review. Learning is building the foundation first, the theory, the concepts, familiarizing yourself with the basics of the exam. So what is logic games, aka analytical reasoning? What is logical reasoning? What is reading comprehension? And then within logic games, what's ordering games or sequencing? What are grouping games? What are combination games? What are rare curveball games? What are pattern games? Let's say hypothetically that grouping games involving selection, aka in out, give you a lot of trouble. You say, okay, great. I know what the problem is, but I'm not just going to do a bunch of grouping games. I'm going to see what are the underlying concepts in grouping games. For example, if we're talking about, let's say, in-out games with conditionality, do I know the contrapositive? Do I know how to diagram if-then statements? Do I know how to link things together into long conditional chains? If not, focus on that fundamental concept first before doing a bunch of individual timed logic game sections. You got to say, okay, well, where can I find a list of grouping games? I have them in my study plans, for example. I have them categorized on my website, the LSAT blog. So you can go there, find a study plan, find the logic games categorizations, and say, okay, well, prep test 33, game 2 is a grouping in-out game. I'll work on that. So is prep test 45, game 3, another grouping in-out game. So I'm not just going to do a bunch of individual random logic game sections because I happen to have that book or they're on Khan Academy. Like, you can do that, but is that working smarter, not harder? Is that working systematically? What I want to do for you is break down the fundamental task strands or concepts associated with logic games overall into discrete individual units covering similar concepts, so you can drill those concepts before seeing them all thrown together and scrambled up in an individual logic game section. And that's the case for all sections. So logical reasoning, there's a grab bag of maybe 15 different question stem types. Instead of just doing individual logical reasoning sections, what if instead you were going to do, okay, well, necessary assumption questions give me trouble. I'm going to focus on those exclusively for a little while to make sure that I understand exactly what necessary assumption questions are asking me to do. I'll also make sure I understand the difference between necessary assumption and sufficient assumption questions. So first, in that learning phase of the exam, you're simply getting a sense of what necessary assumption is asking you to do, what sufficient assumption is asking you to do. Then, once you move from the concepts of learning, the L in laser, you move to A, accuracy, which is actually drilling discretely those questions organized by type. Like I said, I have categorizations of logic games, logical reasoning, even reading comprehension. I have them categorized on my site, the LSAT blog. And what I've done there is said, okay, well, here are all the necessary assumption questions specifically out of the vast majority of older exams. You can use the older exams to drill the fundamentals for that accuracy phase. And then later, you'll get into the S for the individual timed sections and E for the exams and endurance. So learning the concepts, A, drilling those concepts as part of individual questions by type, then S for full length 35-minute timed sections, then E for the exams and endurance, doing full length timed exams to simulate the test day experience. Now, the timed exams for the regular old traditional 5-section LSAT, you had 1 section of logic games, 2 sections of logical reasoning, 1 section of reading comprehension, and then separately mixed in there was an unscored experimental section. That is no longer the case with the LSAT Flex. The LSAT Flex is only 3 sections, not 5. They've removed the unscored experimental section. They've also removed one of those scored logical reasoning sections as well. So you've got games, reasoning, reading comp. You're doing those back to back, only a 1-minute, 60-second break. So 60-second break in between those, and they can appear in any order. So that exams and endurance phase, the E here, you're using that to drill what full-length timed exams will be like. You're simulating that. And for the LSAT Flex, ideally, you want to be practicing this on LSAC's Law Hub website at lawhub.lsac.org. That is the only place to do exams exactly how they're going to look like on test day. Khan Academy exams don't look like the LSAT Flex. Prep companies exams don't look like the LSAT Flex. They may have simulated the 3-section experience, but the look and feel is going to be a little bit different because LSAC is not even permitting any prep companies to mimic exactly what the Law Hub or ProctorU LSAT Flex test day experience will be like. And so you want to make sure you're practicing deliberately as it gets closer to test day. Now, people often ask me, how long should I spend studying for the LSAT? I recommend minimum 3 months, ideally 5 to 6 months to reach your fullest potential on the LSAT. Like I said, it took me a whole year. A lot of it was frustrated, wasting time. I certainly wouldn't wish that on anybody. And I think you can do it in a lot less, especially if you're systematic and not just doing exam after exam, but instead studying smarter, not harder, deliberately building your foundation first. If you're studying full-time, that's fantastic. I understand, obviously, most people can't do that. You have family obligations, work obligations, school obligations, possibly multiple of those at the same time. And so you might only be able to put in 5, 10, 15 hours a week. Whatever you can do is fantastic. Just try to keep that momentum going. Keep it going, even just one question a day or one game or one passage a day. It'll help you stay on track with what you're doing and keep your energy level up. Don't place enormous obligations on yourself that might be difficult to meet because it's taxing. And if you're trying to study at 11 p.m. after a full day of work or school or taking care of family, it can be really hard to give it your all, and your performance on those questions might suffer. The LSAT's a taxing, grueling exam, and the questions are complex. And so doing a tough science reading comprehension passage or a parallel reasoning question or even a game could be really hard, and your performance might be lower than otherwise simply because you're tired. So taking care of sleep, diet, exercise, meditation, prayer, relaxation, all of that is incredibly valuable to keep your energy level up in general and then keep your LSAT mind sharp as well. Now, I know some of you may not be starting from zero. Some of you may have taken the LSAT before. Maybe you didn't study the right way. Maybe you didn't study enough. People ask a lot about retake prep and how it should differ from regular LSAT prep. And it actually doesn't have to differ a whole lot. The biggest difference I see is that you already may know what some of your weak areas are like. And so you can drill those weak areas and target them specifically. So if you know that ordering games give you trouble or grouping logic games give you trouble, you can use those categorizations to focus on those specifically, maybe doing one timed exam a week, maybe two timed exams a week, tracking your mistakes, reviewing them in depth, using that Socratic review method, the R in that laser approach. And then separately on a day when you have a little bit less time to study, or if you did a practice exam yesterday, today you might review it and then do a little bit of work on that weak area, maybe watching one of my videos covering that concept, maybe reading a textbook chapter covering that concept, or just drilling those questions on the side. But focusing on those weak areas is incredibly important.
Thank you guys so much for watching. If you're interested in more advice about the LSAT or advice about law school, make sure that you subscribe to this channel and hit the bell notification so you don't miss every time I post. Like this video if you want to see more of Steve or other LSAT experts on the channel, and I will see you guys next Saturday. Until then, God bless.